So our speaker, let me get this thing to pop up. Matthew has been with the city planning department since 2001. I'm introducing him a little differently so that he can jab at y'all, and I'll tell you why in a minute. He has been a city planner. He was promoted to, let me make sure I get this right, assistant planning director in 2016. He's been doing that since 2016. I'm not going to tell you where he's a native of yet, but he lives here in Murfreesboro with his wife, Sarah. She is a professor of English at Belmont, and they have two children, Nate and Rosie, who attend Murfreesboro City Schools. Matthew is a native of Alabama and a graduate of Auburn. I'll let him give the sports report now.
You're really appreciate yours. All right, I will start off with a hearty War Eagle for everybody, and go blue. So, good afternoon, everybody, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. I prepared a presentation, but if we just want to transition into an airing of grievances, we can do that as well. As Roy said, my name is Matthew Blomeley. I'm the Assistant Planning Director with the City of Murfreesboro Planning Department. I see a lot of familiar faces, or several familiar faces. From 2014 to 2020, I served with Dr. Bonner and Chanto on the Main Street Board of Directors. They do great work at Main Street, and always appreciate Dr. Bonner and Chanto. As Roy said, I've been with the planning department a long time. I've seen a lot of change. I haven't lived in Murfreesboro as long as some of you have, but I've been here 22 years. And when I started out here, I was a young planner. Murfreesboro in the 2000 census was a town of 68,000 people. Now we're up near 160,000 people. And some people may say that's a great thing. Other people may say that's a bad thing. If you think it's a great thing, you can you can pat me on the back. If you think it's a bad thing, let me run out the door real quick in a few minutes. And at any rate, the mission statement of our department is to coordinate the physical development of the city, and there are a number of tools that we have to help us do that. The first kind of an introduction to our department, and our department has grown over the last 22 years since I've been here. We used to be a very small department, actually pretty undersized for even the size of town that we were back in the early 2000s. But now we have Director Mr. McKnight, Assistant Director, myself, 3 principal planners who are very seasoned planning professionals, 3 planners, 3 project engineers, 1 landscape and zoning inspector, and 3 administrative assistants. Our landscape and zoning inspector is the guy that you call if you have a neighbor who's running an auto repair business out of his house, something like that. But what we do, there are 2 different kinds of things that we do in the planning department. Current planning and long-range planning, just in kind of very, very general. Current planning is what most people see us doing on a regular basis. Those are the things that are generally before our planning commission and our city council for consideration. One of those things is annexation. So one of the major functions of our planning commissions and city council relative to planning is determining whether or not our city boundaries should grow. And up until about 5 years ago, we were very liberal with our annexation policies. If someone asked for annexation and we could provide services to it, we generally did annex it. But over the last 5 years, we've really taken a harder look at whether or not it makes sense to annex certain parcels and grow our boundaries, and whether or not it's financially responsible or feasible for us to provide services. So in other words, if someone is requesting annexation for a piece of property that's half a mile outside the current city limits, and it would take our services outside of the city limits and then only to bring them back in. We try to stay away from those kinds of annexations and, be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars that are required to extend services to property that are inside of our corporate boundaries. We handle the zoning and rezoning of property. So, of course, I know many of you are familiar with how zoning works. It dictates what a piece of property can and can't be used for, and there's all different kinds of zoning based on the use of property. Each person's property can only be used for a finite number of things, and those things are dictated by our regulations. And then people come to us for when they want to rezone their property and do something different. You see when you watch Channel 3 or one of the many other venues that you can see our meetings play out on live, you see the applications that get to the Planning Commission. One of the things that I'd like to point out on that big 11 by 17 sheet that's sitting on your tables is that we conduct several hundred meetings a year in-house with staff. And I think that's indicated in one of the rows at the bottom of the page, is that there are so many ideas and proposed developments that folks bring to us that don't even make it to the Planning Commission. We vet it and say, does it make sense? Is it something that we can support? And does it fit with the vision of the city? And so one of the rows there that you'll see is called due diligence and pre-application meetings. You see, we conducted 226 of those meetings. That's staff meeting with developers and last year. And so far, the first half of this year, we've conducted 153. So there is a lot of staff time with our professional planning staff that goes into, making sure that if something doesn't make sense, if something we feel is going to have a negative impact, we will try to keep that from moving, or we'll try to counsel the developer that we will not support it. And in most instances, the developer will respect that and not move forward, although they have the freedom to go ahead and do so. But there's a lot that we do as staff on the front end. And then once those plans come in, once the zoning is approved, then we review the development plans for compliance with our regulations. And so that's not only for compliance with our zoning, things like minimum parking requirements, landscape requirements, but it's also our engineers on staff are looking to make sure that the drainage plan is not going to have any negative impact on the surrounding property owners. So there is a lot that goes into making the sausage, as they say. We also provide staff support to the City Council, the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Historic Zoning Commission. So I talked about current planning, and then there's long-range planning. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to just be reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to set a vision for the community. And by we, I'm not necessarily talking about staff. We're here to provide support to our decision makers, our elected leaders, and our Planning Commission members who are appointed by our elected leaders. So the state law requires that communities adopt a general plan, and that general plan sets forth the vision for the community. And we actually just went through a very comprehensive process updating that general plan. And it was adopted by our Planning Commission a few months ago. We had a general plan that was adopted in 2017. We felt that it needed to be approved. We hired a local consulting firm to work with staff and make it more representative of what we thought the community and our decision makers in city government thought was the vision for our community. And there are also small area plans. And two examples of those, we see the interest daily in downtown development and downtown redevelopment and the areas surrounding downtown. So in 2016, 2017, we invested in two what are called small area plans. One's called the Historic Bottoms plan, and the other one is the North Highlands Planning Study. And those had a ton of community involvement and really set forth a vision for downtown redevelopment. And those plans are on our website, and they're actually really good reads. And it was a really interesting process to go through and hear the community. That's one of the great things about planning is working with the community, hearing what the community thinks, so we can make plans better, so we can make the how things move forward more representative of what people desire for our community. The 8.5 by 11 spreadsheet that I provided to you is just a snapshot of the permitting information for calendar year 2022 and the first half of calendar year 2023. So the numbers have slightly declined for residential over the last 2 to 3 years. You can imagine before 2008, we were permitting about 2,000 single family detached homes per year. Then the recession hit, and then after 2015, that number slowly started climbing up, and we were up to about 1,100 single-family detached homes per year around 2020, and that number has kind of drifted downward just a tad, but we are still seeing great interest in residential development in Murfreesboro. But one thing our elected leaders and our planning commission members have attempted to do is to make sure that's done in a smart way, and that, as I mentioned, annexing property for residential development is sometimes does not pay for itself, and so we're trying to focus our residential development in towards the existing city limits, in towards the downtown, and so I think that is one of the. I mentioned the interest in downtown redevelopment. We are seeing quite a bit of interest in downtown redevelopment. And so to prepare for that, about 10 years ago, we adopted kind of relaxed regulations for our downtown, not necessarily relaxed regulations regarding the quality, but relaxed regulations so that, many of our regulations were really geared towards suburban development, and it really created kind of a difficult time getting downtown redevelopments off the ground. And so we put some common sense regulations in place to help spur downtown redevelopment in a way that fits within the framework of downtown. Folks who live downtown, do business downtown, want a walkable community. They don't want, a third of an acre lot, or many times don't necessarily need a large yard. All of the things that people who live in a subdivision on the fringe of town need. So having a more urban type development is something that we have tried to promote downtown. For example, there's an approved plan on South Manny Avenue called Manny Station, which it's a mixed use development, and what we would call vertical mixed use, having retail on the bottom and residential condos above it. And that's on South Manny Avenue. And it brings the development close to the street to frame the street like you would see in a more traditional urban development. And I think we'll see more of those types of developments. In fact, our city council is currently negotiating with a developer for the redevelopment of the lots that the city owns, kind of framing the intersection of Northwest Broad Street and South Church Street, where the old police department building is, the old WGNS, the old city hall where the water and fire departments are located right now, for a vertical mixed use development with residential units above, retail on the bottom, a hotel. And that project continues to move forward. Some of you may or may not have heard about that, but we're very excited about the prospect of that development, and that will go right along with our daylighting of Town Creek. How many of y'all have heard about the daylighting of Town Creek across from, several of y'all, great, across from City Hall on the other side of Broad Street? So the city has, yes, ma'am. Yeah, so the city has purchased a number of those old buildings on the opposite side of Broad Street, where the old Subway, the old Copy Mat, Budget Breaks. So Town Creek, which you see at Cannonsburg, and then when you hit Front Street, it goes underground. Wasn't always underground. It went underground in the 50s. So there's this huge failing pipe underground that takes Town Creek from Cannonsburg over to Murfree Springs. And so the city is, while we've got failing infrastructure there, the city is taking the opportunity to daylight that creek, bring it back to its natural state, and create a linear park along Broad Street. And so in conjunction with what we're proposing there with Town Creek, with the development across the street, there'll be a pedestrian bridge going across Broad Street. Don't know the timing of that, but really trying to create a destination there, something that draws people to downtown, because I think the interest is there, and the face of downtown changed quite a bit with the construction of Broad Street. And many of those buildings are 1950s, 1960s era buildings that are just getting to the around the end of their useful life. And so when we adopted the historic bottom study, we saw the opposite side of Broad Street as a way to continue the synergy that is going on around downtown right now, and continue that across Broad Street. So in addition to downtown growth, we're continuing to see industrial growth. Parkway Place, which is a Swanson development on Joe B. Jackson Parkway. There was recently an announcement about McNeilus Oshkosh occupying the 800,000 square foot industrial building off Joe B. Jackson Parkway. McNeilus Oshkosh is based out of Minnesota, and they make electric garbage trucks. So a really neat opportunity for the city, and it's been neat learning about their trucks. And what they plan on doing here is assembling those trucks. And it's a huge investment in our community, and a really neat opportunity. Of course, the FedEx distribution center opened last year off of Joe B. Jackson Parkway as well. Commercial growth. Many of you may or may not have heard. I know that there are people who have extremely loyal followings to Buc-ee's. And you may have heard that we are getting a Buc-ee's on at the intersection of, or at the Joe B. Jackson Parkway interchange. I've been in a Buc-ee's once at my in-laws. They have at their exit in Kentucky. They had the very first one in Kentucky. I made the mistake of going there on a July 4th weekend. That was not pleasant. But I'm assuming it's more pleasant on other weekends. No. Okay. Good to know. Yes, sir. No, that's a good question. So Elam Road / Butler Drive is going to be rerouted further to the west, away from the interchange. And that'll be good because it will get additional separation from the on and off ramps at that interchange. And that will actually be constructed simultaneously with Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's will be reconstructing on their side, or realigning on their side, and the city will be realigning on the Butler Drive side. So Buc-ee's had to they had quite a bit of work to do with the state because they're reworking some of the ramp that's next door to their site. So I believe they have just recently started moving dirt down there. Yeah. I don't know exactly what their time frame is for completion.
Who has been in a Buc-ee's?
World's best cinnamon roll.
The king of beef jerky. That's, you know, you can get any kind of beef jerky you want there.
In that area, what about Broad Street? Why is that area at all?
So Broad Street is a state highway, and it has been on our major transportation plan for eons and eons to widen. Unfortunately, since it's a state highway, it's dependent on the state moving forward with that. But we do have it, I think, as a 5-lane to Rutherford and then a 3-lane out from Rutherford to Joe B. Jackson Parkway, if and when the state wants to move forward with that.
Do you have any kind of time frame that they have a project?
No, as far as I know, there is no time frame on that. I think it's not on their priority list.
To make it pop down here,
Well, that leads to another question. Is there anyone assigned to, anyone that works for the state assigned to Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, or
Yeah, so they
county cluster?
yeah they have a field office down here, and we have a transportation department, and one of their primary responsibilities is to deal with TDOT. That's not the right way to say it. To work with TDOT, and so one of the things that historically our city council has been really good at is putting in more into the pot for state projects than other communities. And if you put more into the pot, sometimes that helps get your project accelerated a little bit. But you know, right now with the widening of New Salem Highway, that's a big state project that's going on. And I remember before I moved into my current house, and I see my neighbor right back there, a couple doors down. Before I moved into my current house, I lived off of River Rock Boulevard, and one of my bosses said, "Don't move down there. They're going to be starting a road widening project in a year now." And I've lived there from 2003 to 2014, and I got out of there before they started. It never happened.
Let me say something about that on Broad Street as a historical perspective. Helping the business there 33 years ago, and at that point in time, they were talking about how widening Broad Street was going to be imminent, to the point where I had to pull out one of our front signs and have it destroyed. That was 33 years ago.
Anybody that does redevelopment along there, we still require them to dedicate right of way in anticipation of that one day being done. But it's when and if that day will come.
Not on the schedule.
Maybe not in my career. We'll see. Yeah, all that will go ahead and start. With the grant money that we are using to daylight Town Creek, I think there's a time frame by which it must be complete. So you'll start to see construction move forward on that pretty quickly. In fact, if you've been by there in the last few months, you've seen that some of those buildings have already been raised. And the pedestrian bridge, I don't know that there's a time frame for that, but I think it is something that will be imminent in the next few years. Stacy was asking during lunch about all that's going on out there off of Medical Center Parkway across from the avenue. That's the Clary Park development, which is it's kind of a mixed use, but not mixed use, the vertical mixed use that we think of as mixed use. It's commercial out parcels up front and then a variety of types of residential behind it. But so if you go out Medical Center Parkway, you see all that dirt moving going on right now. That's what that is. There's a Whataburger, a Black Rifle Coffee Company, a Firebirds restaurant, which I've never heard of, but I think it's a sit-down restaurant. Are they good? Okay. Yes.
The amphitheater still?
Yes. It's moving forward. I don't know what the holdup is, but it is still moving forward. The Legacy Sports on Broad Street is not, so it is not moving forward. And you may have been following the land swap on Veterans Parkway. Which the city swapped properties with Middle Tennessee Electric late last year or early this year. The city had property that it was going to build a park on, but determined that that property was better situated for economic development, and that Middle Tennessee Electric, which with its contacts at TVA, could be better positioned to market it towards folks who would provide a good economic development opportunity. And so the city swapped with Middle Tennessee Electric its property that's further to the south on Veterans Parkway. And at one of our last council meetings, the mayor and council, and this has been something that's been a hot topic over the last few years, that there's really a park needed on the west side of town for anybody who might live on the west side of town. And they're moving forward with the design of the park at that location. And so I think that will probably be an evolving picture of what that park will look like. So that's kind of my spiel. I was told to leave time for some questions and answers, so I'll do that. Y'all be kind to me and give me 10s on my evaluation here next. Yes, sir.
What is easy?
Okay. My favorite kind.
Yeah. What do you think that the redevelopment of the area of the city, which is the old, was it Methodist or Presbyterian?
So that's a good question. So they have not moved forward as quickly as we would have liked. And so our city manager and our administration are currently working on that to determine how to proceed. I think there was some action taken on that a few council meetings ago and some discussion. I think that COVID probably hit those developers hard and probably pushed them back on schedule. So more to come on that, I think.
The second question was to do with the Oshkosh and city development. And while I commend you for getting them, I teach at TSU. And one of the things that concerns me is the students having to go into the Nashville and surrounding area to get a job, and we're not really developing middle class, at least middle class university required jobs. And I wondered why that was.
I think our economic development team at City Hall is actively seeking those kinds of jobs. I think that there are several things that we have to overcome. One of which, and historically, I think we have been kind of a blue collar city, and I think there is the perception outside of our community that perhaps we can't support those types of jobs, and you see many of those opportunities for white collar jobs that go to Williamson County, and so I think a lot of it is a perception. I think it's a balance that we have to strike of good blue collar jobs and white collar jobs, but our team is actively trying to recruit those companies to come here. It just proves difficult sometimes. Yes, sir.
My understanding that daylighting Camp Creek there, that they buried it because of flood, the area on where it's affected. Geography doesn't seem to be any different in the entire daylighting, flooding the area.
Yep. We have a great local engineering firm that's worked on the design, Griggs and Maloney, and we've got very competent engineers on our staff who I feel confident that they will ensure that does not happen. I don't have a PE behind my name, so I don't know that I can speak to that. Anybody else?
For the traffic out on the streets, like the whole boulevard, what are y'all doing about that?
On Memorial Boulevard, I don't know that there are any plans for any improvements on Memorial Boulevard. And that would be a difficult one too, because there's, so much development that is from the last 30 or 40 years that is built pretty close to the street. But anytime on an existing roadway that we have a development, we look at that development and say, what impact is it going to have? What roadway improvements does it warrant? In our line of work, we're really tied to what impact does that development have? What can we make them do that has a rational basis in the impact that they are going to have on the community and on the roadway system? So yeah, of course, Thompson Lane is slated for widening. I don't have the updated time frame on that. We're trying to be proactive on road construction projects to alleviate some of the capacity issues on other roadways, such as the Cherry Lane extension going from Memorial Boulevard to Broad Street with the new interchange there. And so sometimes it's not all about providing more capacity on existing roadways by widening those roadways. Sometimes it's about giving folks alternative ways around our community. And so, a lot of times after Veterans Parkway was built around the southwest side of the community, people would say, why'd y'all build this road through the middle of nowhere? When it's not always about, widening roadways to provide more capacity on that road. Sometimes it's about providing folks with alternative ways to get around to alleviate some of those capacity issues. One of the things that our city council has been proactive in doing, and that we're kind of learning how to implement, is the adoption of an impact fee ordinance. And that went into effect on July the 1st. And so state law gives us the ability to charge impact fees to offset the impact on our community in 4 different ways. There's roadways, public safety, parks, and schools. And so for every development that has new square footage, a building with new square footage, or a residential development with new units, our new ordinance requires the city to charge impact fees to address the impact of those developments on our infrastructure. And so that helps to put the burden of addressing that impact on the development community to be commensurate with the impact that they're having, not necessarily to put all the burden on them, but to be commensurate with the impact that they're having, as opposed to putting that burden on the general taxpayer. So, we won't see all of those dollars come in for some time, as we've just now started assessing that. But I think that's definitely a good thing that our city council has adopted. I think I had time for one question.
Is it within your purview to do anything with non-trash or the dump, as it affects the air quality and the city of Murfreesboro?
Personally, not in my purview, but so not necessarily in my department. Our assistant city manager, Darren Gore, is working very hard to as the city's representative in addressing the impending lack of capacity at the landfill. And so he is actively seeking other solutions and moving forward with those solutions. As far as air quality, I live in close proximity to the landfill. We smell it on a regular basis. I wish there was more that I could do personally, but yeah.
That's just a question. Whether we had any impact on it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Matthew, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh,
today.
thank you.
Take you with a token of our appreciation.
Thank you. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. If no one has anything else, we are adjourned.